Another real cool thing about working with servers is that if you are afraid of networking and all of this because of the associated Hollywood movies of people tracing you down and coming to your house, in other words, if you're afraid of network security, is that you can really just play around with it to start to enjoy it. I'm not saying there aren't real security concerns when you're working with networking, but for the most part, I think people are really stuck in paranoia. Now, one of the things you can really get to enjoy this is if you just set up a basic server and you learn about starting cron jobs, which is just, as far as I understand it, repeated execution of a certain file or command. And if you learn to write a little bash script or you have one generated or made for you, you can compile log files of things like SSH and Nginx and just leave your server there running. You're not going to make a website. You just leave the server running and you just collect all the data that's coming in. And what you can do with this data is you can learn to map the, the, the risks. Because one of the things you'll learn if you ever started a server and you looked into the logs of SSH is that there's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of computers that are trying to get into your SSH, trying random account information. And they do this not just for SSH, also for WordPress. And if you had if you hosted a file shortening service, like a URL shortening service, like for instance tinyurl, they will spam these links and hijack your domain. This data is very interesting because if you don't tell anybody about your website, anybody who's still interfacing with your website is clearly either an attacker or Google or some other web crawler. And what you can then do is collect the information, what they're trying to access, to understand the way their attacks work and also what they're looking for. And based on this, you can basically just passively, like sitting in nature, observing the natural process of the internet, if you will, learn a lot about what works and what does not work when it comes to security. And with this information, you're also going to realize that most of the vulnerabilities that you are fighting are actually vulnerabilities in passwords informations and how you're storing the data and whether you're clicking links that people are giving you. Most of these vulnerabilities are not like you turn on a computer and somehow this guy is looking at you through your webcam. A lot of it is vulnerabilities that you can easily prevent. For instance, if you look at the SSH logging, most of them are trying very simple combinations like admin, password, stuff like this. I really advise people who are still young to do this passive approach to networking when you're starting out, so that you can really learn to understand what major vulnerabilities are, what's really going on, is there really people targeting you, or are these automated processes? How do the automated processes work? And if you so much dare, which is something I still would like to do at some point, but I have no time for it, set up a series of honey traps, which is basically you allow a bot or an attacker to access a fake version of your server to see what they're trying to do. Now, with AI and all of this, I really wonder if this type of behavior can be modeled, and you could then sort of like have a risk factor every time someone tries to access your server if they're repeating certain behavioral patterns. I'm sure it exists, but there's a lot of interesting things, and really it's just like bird watching. It's very interesting. Now, what I've done here is basically just that. I have an empty server that nobody should know about, and if somebody tries to go to my Nginx server, I'm logging it. And then I use a cron job to turn that into a web page. So the cron job calls a bash script, which is like creating the table using using bash from the logs of nginx. You should also compile what they're trying to look for, if they even do, or more interestingly, what triggers them to look for something. Because a lot of these bot networks are very intelligent, and if they don't see that you're running WordPress, they're not going to try to do anything WordPress related. And what triggers them to identify it as WordPress? You can figure all this stuff out if you have a lot of free time.